Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Midweek program at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the Education Assistant here at the Arboretum, and today we are in our Education Center because it's actually raining right now, which is really wonderful because we are in the middle of a drought and we can really use the rain, but that's not going to stop us from putting on a program for you today. We've got our research technician, Tim Alderton, sitting at a table that is absolutely chock-a-block with perennial plants. That's right. These are perennial plants. You may be seeing a few on there that look like annuals. They might have been sold to you as annuals. Well, our program today is called perennials. We are going to be talking through a whole suite of plants that somebody at some point probably told you this was an annual and you need to rip it out at the end of the season just so you can buy another one next year. Well, they're perennials. So Tim's going to walk us through some of these plants and show them off and tell us a little bit about them. And so it should be a wonderful program. Those of you watching this on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below. And with the announcements out of the way, I will pass things over to Tim to tell us all about his perennials.
So yeah, I've been thinking about plants a lot recently, aside from normal, that is bedding plants in particular. And the annuals that we are confronted with at this time of the year, especially for our summer gardens. Mainly because yesterday I spent, 4 or 5 hours planting our color trials with the volunteers. I've had the opportunity to do a little bit more with that this year than in previous years because our coworker has retired, Bernadette Clark, and she did the annuals before, or the color trials before. And so I'm kind of taking that on. And I always have looked to see what might work in the garden as a little bit longer term than annual. Despite the fact that they are, a lot of plants are promoted as annuals, they in fact are perennials in their native or natural state, though a lot of these are very complex hybrids. So sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But one that won't work here, but is truly a perennial in its native climates or in warmer places are actually, I think it's back to Coleus. I've learned this plant 5 different ways, I think, in the last, let's say 45 years or so. Anyways, this is Coleus, and this one, do not count on this one being a perennial in our climate, but it's truly a perennial. And as are so many of the other annuals that we are confronted with on a daily basis when we go to a nursery in the springtime, especially to get that color that we want for our summer gardens, or a color for the winter as well. But today we're going to focus mostly on summer things. But anyways, so Coleus here, these are proven winter ones, and they have a rating of a balmy zone 10A. So these get down to can take to about 30, I think, or is it theoretically, degrees, and might not die. So these, we don't get even that mild here. So though we are getting ever milder in our winters here in central North Carolina and eastern North Carolina for that matter. But so we're just going to throw these out for now. So. But we'll get on to some other things. So for me, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, and my family had a small greenhouse. And one plant that I grew a lot of over the years were dianthus. This is another one from Proven Winners. And these are sold as annuals, but if you look at the label, this one does say 4A to 9B. That puts it in our range, but also for Minnesota. I was just up there, and this would survive about negative 35 to 40 degrees theoretically, if I do my math right. Yes. But anyways, these have always been sold as annuals, and I grew these in Western Pennsylvania at my family's nursery as annuals. This is a dianthus. This is a Dianthus chinensis barbatus hybrid based on the way it looks to me. Which is a Sweet William crossed with a Chinese pink for the common names. They are super hardy and much more reliable than what nurseries might have you want to realize. You can plant these, they'll last 3 to 5 years typically in a landscape without too much worry on them. The worst you have to do to make them continue to flower is they tend to get some spent flower stalks in here. You go through a few times in the summer and they'll continue to flower pretty much the entire summer. But this is one from Proven Winners called Foreverly Red. What's its real name? Do I have that? You don't want to know its real name. Actually, I know the breeder.
Indulge us, Tim. What is it?
It's G2, which is my friend Rich Grazzini's company. G21002.
Well, that's easy to remember.
It is. It's Foreverly Red.
Oh, there you go.
He did some of this breeding work in central Pennsylvania, so before he is now, I think, in Ohio, but still, I know Rick there. But this is, like I said, this is something I grew up with, truly a perennial, even in the chilly north. So, but touted as annuals, just for the sake that, well, if you rip it out, or if the people rip it out, I can sell them something new. So, anyways, one that I always wanted to grow before I moved down here as a perennial because I'm lazy, but I couldn't be lazy for that, were dahlias. Many people are familiar with dahlias, and I'm finding that, I mean, for us here in the Raleigh area, they've been fully hardy for us for decades, if not forever, from what I understand. But these are pretty much hardy throughout the entire state of North Carolina, what I'm finding, except for maybe the highest elevations. These are rated zone 7, more or less. These are some, I don't have any open yet, but so these are some from my trials. I'm looking forward to planting. I have some spares, which I'm gonna put in some other places that aren't the annual color trials. I'm gonna put them out in the garden and in some other beds where they can hopefully test to see if they're perennial. One thing I find with some of the dahlias is they've been selecting them for propagatability. And that goes along with them not shutting down in production. So they can either do that with day length or breeding plants that, well, just don't want to shut down. And dahlias traditionally were overwintered using their tubers. Before you live further north, you dig the tuber and bring it in. These don't always like to make good tubers. Or wimpy tubers, so they aren't always fully hardy here, though they should be. So it's sometimes finding out which ones of these are still producing good, viable tubers to survive the winter on these. But all in all, great plant to try. If you want to try a dahlia, there's dark-leafed ones, which is what I always like, and this is one, City Lights Compact Magenta. So I think that's to be compared to one, the Bishop's Child type, which are dark-leafed and fairly tall. This is a little bit more on the compact side than that. And I don't know what this one's going to look like yet. This is something color burst. I can't see its first part of its name. But we had another one that was red and orange. This is a pink-flowered one, I can tell from that. But we'll see what happens. I'm going to play around with those this summer. So dahlias are something to experiment with. And that's something I need to point out. Not all these will prove hardy, but they are technically perennials. And sometimes you win some, and sometimes you lose some. And sometimes it depends on where you put them in your landscape. And I'll explain that a little further later on. So anybody who's lived I think, in the Raleigh area for a long time will be familiar with lantanas. They love our heat. They are great summer annuals, but a lot of them are multi-year perennials. They might, the tender ones might fizzle out every 4 to 5 years if we have, or 4 out of 5 years they're good, or 8 out of 10 years they're good. They might live longer than that. But so this is a selection that we have for this year in the trials that I was pulling from. And again, here's one from Proven Winners. I like their labels because they give you theoretic zonage. And this is a Luscious Series one. And I've been growing a lot of the Luscious over the years. And they're saying zone 9A. That's a full zone warmer than what we are. These are typically fine for us in this climate. And they're great for a droughty year too. So that's another purpose for growing lantanas. Once they're established, you don't need to water them. And they do just fine. So yeah, try those lantanas in your landscape. They're sub-shrubs in reality, or shrubs actually. In the wild, I saw some lantana growing in a park in Buenos Aires a few years ago, and when I was down there visiting, and they were 8-10 feet tall.
Nice.
They can be somewhat weedy. Our climate, they tend not to be weedy, but they can be good perennials for us. So even if you're uncertain, these are worth a try. Put them in that hot, dry spot once that is water to establish, even in our droughty year. And you may find that they'll be perfectly happy. I've been finding there's some that only get 12 to 15 inches tall now. I've been finding that those are even hardy for us most winters. Again, I might lose them every 1 out of 5 years if that's the case. The larger growing ones, like Luscious series, tends to be fairly vigorous, 4 or 5 feet wide and 2 to 3 feet tall, sometimes bigger than you want after a few years. Those tend to be really easygoing. So something that you may already know, but this is also for newbies here to the southeast, and as well as we'll get some things that'll go up north. We have a new volunteer with us, Tessa, today, who just moved here from Michigan. So this might be useful information for her to, the labels don't always match what you might expect or have been your previous experience other places. So.
And it never hurts to try plants in new situations.
Exactly.
And what's wonderful about this concept of perennials is there's not much at stake, really. Like you plant it to see if it will perennialize. If it doesn't, so what? You had it as its annual show that year.
But my thought is don't rip it out immediately unless you really don't like the plant.
Yeah.
In that case, I would leave those in the ground. Another group of plants that I like to experiment with, and not all are equally as hardy as what I found, but there's a good number that are the verbenas, which are actually now split out into the genus Glandularia, unless it's Verbena bonariensis, which is still a verbena, or Verbena rigida. We won't get into that. But the Glandularias are those typical trailing verbenas that you'd see in hanging baskets or containers. So many of them are proving hardy for us. This is one that I think I planted 3 or 4 years ago now. The trade name for this one is Superbena Pink Cashmere, and I have it in our perennial border. It's gone through a first flush already this season, and then I have another one in the trial area that's been there the same amount of time. It'll flower repeatedly through the summer. You'll get a flush. It'll take a vacation for a couple of weeks. Then you get another flush of flowers. But that's one I've had experience with. But I have a bunch of other new ones here that I'm going to try this summer. I have this really cool bicolor, and I think it is Firehouse Violet Vortex. It's a bicolor, and it's just really cool. Purple with white to pale pink, depending on how you look at it in the lighting. There's some orange shades and red shades as well. So those are ones I want to give a try. I don't know. Some of them will probably prove to be hardy for us. And again, I won't know unless I try. So another thing for those moving down here that you might be surprised, we're not in Florida, but we can grow elephant ears. And you think, this is a tiny little thing that I have in this pot. And anybody who's been living in this area, I'm hoping, has seen these around here. This is one that was introduced by Juniper Level Botanic Gardens Plant Delights Nursery around, I'm going to say, 2002 or 2004, somewhere in there.
Sure, yeah.
This is Colocasia, or I think they say maybe Leucocasia now.
Okay.
Gigantea, Thailand giant form. This is a seed strain that we grow here. This little thing, I sowed this seed in the 1st of January. It's only, 4 inches tall right now? This will be about 6 to 8 feet tall by the end of the summer and have leaves as big as this table. So it is just a really cool plant, even whether it's grown as an annual or a perennial. But most winters, they come back up. Don't have to worry about them. The typical elephant ears, most of them, that is the Colocasia esculenta selections, as well as a variety of alocasias, have proven hardy for us here in central North Carolina and east. And there's a few crazy selections, I think, is it Pink China maybe? Colocasia esculenta, Pink China, that I've heard zone 6A, 5B maybe hardy. So they're long thought as tropicals, but that would not be hardy, but we are finding that there are genes out there that let them survive in these other climates that we would have never thought about even 10, 15, or 20 years ago. So this is truly one of my favorites, and we'll have some of these for sale in a few weeks. These are just babies that we potted up, I think, about a week and a half ago. So. Here's another one you might think is strange that I have here, and this goes back to Blake and I know had growing in front of our staff building. For the last 4 years, I had a kale. The one I had over there, I think, was a dinosaur kale type, but it refused to die for 4 years. It finally died this winter. Yeah, 4 years was, just too short a time to have that around.
Well, it was incredible. It was starting to get like a woody stem on
woody.
it, and you're just like, what?
But this is one we had in the trials last year. This is a standard. This is ruby boar, and we had this, and I had one of these survive in a pot until I threw it away in about a month ago, just because I didn't want to deal with it out in the trials, unprotected through our winters. So, I mean, they're grown as an annual vegetable.
Yeah.
But some of them are really attractive. You can grow them as ornamentals as well. But if you're patient and put up with a little bit of some downtime on them, they will reflush for a couple of years, if not more, as long as you don't eat them too much.
Sure.
Use it in your salad sparingly, and you'll probably have some decent results with that. So, but everyone here, this is cousin to collards. I have not personally grown collards. I don't like collards.
We got collards growing out behind the yurt. So you've technically at least been in the vicinity while collards were growing.
I would rather eat kale than collards. But anyways.
He's a northerner.
Yeah, I'm a northerner. Yeah. But this is the same species as cabbage, collards, cauliflower, broccoli, thing called kohlrabi, Brussels sprouts. They're all the same species, but the kale seems to be pretty darn hardy. Let's just put it that way. So if you want to have a little bit of fun, you can plant your kale. That tends to if it survives our summer, that's the killer for kale, I think, here is more our summer than our winter. So if you can keep it through our summer, you're probably going to have a nice plant that'll stay with you all winter, and then maybe stay with you for a couple years. It'll bolt next spring. You can either let it go to seed, or you can deadhead it to prevent it from flowering, and which might actually make it persist a bit longer. So just a fun edible perennial. And we don't think of too many edible perennials other than asparagus and, for me, rhubarb.
Yeah, and particularly not the brassicaceous stuff.
No, I think of them as maybe biennials.
Yeah, for sure. It's like one of the most common food crops over the course of all of human history, and we've always used it as an annual, but like it's perennial. What do you know?
In reality. Yeah. So I have something next to me here that this is a delphinium. I don't remember which species. This is a species one that we had in the nursery. The cultivars, though, up north are much more spectacular, and the Delphinium exaltatum hybrids, which people grow in the north. They say, I hate the summers here. You can grow them as a cool season annual for us. That is, you plant them in the fall. They flower in April, and then they are dead by June if they survive that long.
Sure.
I mean, truly dead. So they aren't reliable perennials here. But I have a cousin of theirs, which I think today they may be classifying as a delphinium, or let's call it larkspur, Consolidea ambigua or ajax. It may be delphinium ambigua or ajax. I don't remember. Like I said, they keep on changing it. But for us, these are actually a true annual. But they perennialize in the sense that they self-sow readily. They reliably flower for us here late April and May and into early June. So it's something you can plant, and as long as you aren't too fastidious of a weeder, you can have actually too many of these. They kind of fill in voids, and then they die. You let them go a little bit to seed and pull out what you don't want, and you'll surely have some come back the next year, which is the great thing. Because I did not plant these in the garden. These came from some dormant seed when we turned over soil several years ago. I went from like having 2 or 3 plants that would pop up to thousands and thousands. Each winter pop up, and I get a beautiful display in, again, late April and early May and through early June, depending on how hot and dry it gets. So anyways, not a true perennial, but a perennial, an annual that's acting more as a perennial for us, as a substitute for its cousin, the more commonly grown northern delphiniums. Okay, back in here in this corner, I have salvias, which there's a variety of sages here. I grew up growing sages, especially one that's not in here, Salvia splendens, the scarlet sage. That one is truly tropical. But there's a bunch of other salvias that here in the southeast that we can grow that are theoretically still considered annuals a lot of times. The Salvia farinaceas, which is what these two are, and then there's a hybrid with a farinacea right here, not flowering yet. Those are from Texas and Gulf Coast area, northern Mexico, and they do just fine here as a long-term perennial. I have a white one in the garden, Augusta Dolberg, who came from a cemetery somewhere in Texas, apparently. She self-sows reliably, but also perennial. I mean, the original plants have been there for decades, or not decades, but 5-10 years anyways, in the garden. And it flowers the entire season. They've been flowering for probably 3 or 4 weeks already, and then we'll go till frost, which is a terribly short display there, I think. I don't know if we can put up with that lack of flowering. But so these are commonly sold as bedding plants, the Salvia farinaceas, the mealy cup sages. But most of the time they make pretty good perennials for us, I will say. Not all the selections are equal, but a good number are proving to be really great in our landscapes. Another one, which is a little less hardy, but this is a pink flowered Salvia garnitica hybrid called Rockin' Fuchsia, which the Salvia garniticas, the common one is black and blue, or black and bloom is another one, or Argentine skies. They are thugs. They put some other species with this, and you get this nice plant that is a clump former. It gets 3 to 4 feet, I think, probably for Rockin' Fuchsia, if I'm right. Yeah, about 2 to 3 is what they're saying here. But if it perennializes, it can get bigger than that. I've been growing a few other selections of these hybrids. They're, like I said, super well behaved. I've had Rockin' Deep Purple in the garden probably for more than 10 years, and it has a clump that might be 3 feet across instead of 13 feet across, which if it were Salvia Black and Blue. And I'd be wanting to rip it all out. I don't do anything to them. And they get about 4 to 5 feet, maybe even 6 feet tall, that Rockin' Deep Purple. So another one is Amistad, which even gets bigger. It might get 6 to 7 feet tall. But these Salvia garniticas originally, in their hybrids, would have originally been considered annuals. And what do they suggest here? They're saying zone 9A on the proven winners label here. But I've had this selection actually out in front at the Arboretum sign now for probably 4 to 5 years.
Nice.
And it's been well behaved. So something else to try, some different colors. The shrubby sages are also some good ones. These are either Salvia macrophylla or Gregii or hybrids of the two. These are from a series, the Outshine series, which is a new one for us in our trials this year. We have Outshine Red and Outshine Orchid. So I'm going to see what they do, but most of the time, these salvias have been wonderful for us in our landscapes. They're often called autumn sages. Don't let that name confuse you. They only flower again for a short period between anywhere from April 1st, typically, until November 15th, just a couple days in there. They may take a week or two off if we have 100 in the middle of summer or it gets really hot and dry. But in general, really good bloomers for us. And I'd say probably solid zone 7B, if not 7A for these. I don't have as much information on these. Again, I have these in the annual trials, but I'm going to sneak some in a few other places to see what they do. So these are some of the more typical things I think about thinking of as perennial, because some of these are actually the verbena or glandularias are native to the southeast and actually Mexico and Latin America as well. And the salvias also have that same range. So we know a lot of those already have been perennial for a while, but there's some other things that are becoming more apparent for us that are perennial that you might run across. And one of these are these, which are really common now, Calibrachoas. This is one I've forgotten the name, but I have this out in the garden. I picked this, it's actually going out onto the rooftop. This is one that's been there 3 years now. Calibrachoas are actually little subshrubs. So they get a woody base, and they can be evergreen. Last winter was a little hard. I have a seedling on the rooftop, actually. It went deciduous. It died part way back, but it's flowering again already. So there's more and more of these available. And the key I found with these, and that's, I kind of insinuated early on, some of these takes a little bit special care to get them to persist. And the thing I've learned with calibrachoas is don't baby them. They don't want extra water. They don't want extra fertilizer. If you give them too much food and drink, they will die on you. If you're stingy with the food and water, you're typically going to have a plant that will outlive more than 1 year. It'll probably be, I've had some last 5 years before they fizzled out, which I think is pretty good. I don't know about you. I had some out in front of the loblollies in front of the lath house for 5 years. The key thing there is I don't plant them in a bed that is regularly irrigated. So you don't want to have a sprinkler system that goes off at 7 o'clock every other morning of the week. You will rot them. And actually in our color trials, that is something we have an issue with. I can kill calibrachoas in the ground in our color trials because we have a regular watering system, or have. I'm going to try to cut back, going along with our drought this summer. I'm going to try to cut back on our watering in some of these to see if I can get them to persist longer, both in our color trials as annuals, as well as some as perennials. And I like to use our extra ones, and I tuck them in here and there in the garden, and which is the fun thing. And there's so many different colors. Here's just a small selection. I have some orange. I have this double flowered fuchsia colored one. There's pure yellow ones. There's double yellow ones. There's striped flowered ones. There's so many forms of calibrachoa that are now available. This is closely related to another plant that you probably are growing in your garden as an annual. And technically, they're probably annual, short-lived perennials, even in the wild. This is a petunia. And this is one, I don't even think of the petunias as being so much of a perennial, but they are. And this is one, the bubblegum, Supertunia bubblegum. This is Vista bubblegum, but anyways, I planted some of these last year out in front of our hanging basket trials and container trials. And I noticed actually last week, there's one popping back up from the original crown. It's not in flower yet, but petunias, if you're, again, able to put up with a little bit of disorder in your garden, it'll die back pretty good, but these can come back up from the root. Unlike their calibrachoa cousins, which are truly little subshrubs, these tend to be herbaceous. So the thing I want to play around with this year is, these are some, I have no clue what's going to happen. These are some calibrachoa petunia hybrids, which you see them as pechoas or calatunias.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, pick your name there.
Pechoa's fun, but calatunia sounds more like petunia. That might be more effective.
I don't know.
marketing.
But anyways, I want to see if they're hardy. I've not had, we have like 4, I think, in our trials this year, different ones. And I'm going to plant some out in the open garden and see what happens to them. I want to see if they react more like the calibrachoa or if they react more like the petunia. So again, you get to experiment. You're not out anything. You buy these as annuals again. If they survive, they survive. So that's one I wanted to play around with. So these are related to the tomato, potato, eggplant, that Brugmansia, that is angel trumpets, which angel trumpets, the Brugmansia and daturas are actually often perennial for us here in this area. And Mark was actually, we have another plant out here, used to be Iachroma. I'm not sure what its going name is today. It's on its 3rd or 4th different name while I've been working here, since I planted it in about 2009 or 10. And it's a shrub about 6 to 7 feet tall, little bluebells early in the late spring, early summer. And it's out of flush right now, where I would have brought some in. But anyways, it's closely related to that. So it's a woody plant. And he says, oh, you should talk about that. But these are all closely related in reality. So another genus, that Nurembergia, you'll sometimes find those. Those are sold as annuals. Again, they will often survive for several years here before they fizzle out. So on to some other things in here. This is one I laugh at pretty often. This is Tradescantia pallida. I think they call them purple hearts or something, which
Sure, yeah.
I still
Yeah.
don't get that part. I don't know. Do you know where the purple hearts come
The
from?
little flowers kind of look heart-shaped
They're
a little bit.
three-petaled. I don't see.
Well, yeah, if you
It's-
squint real hard and
I don't get it. I'm too literal on my plant morphology and flowers. But anyways, Tradescantia pallidas or Secretia pallida. I see these around Raleigh. They plant them in front of housing developments at the signs. And then, that is the landscapers, and then they come around in October and pull them all out and plant pansies. They could just cut them back and they'd come right back up in the spring.
honestly, for sure.
And plant the pansies around them and it'd be fine and dandy.
We've got some zephyranthes on the perennial border that bloom up through that.
Yeah,
And like the color combinations you can get from that kind of thing is really, really cool.
These are much hardier than I expected. It hasn't survived too many years, but once or twice my brother has had this survive, or actually my sister-in-law, I should say. I told her just plant some cuttings out in the ground next to their house, which it's zone 6A technically now. But anyways, it gets cold on top of their hill, and they've had it survive at least once or twice. So they're hardier than one would expect. But these are a great house plant for those of you who live in the house, or if you have one in your house, plant it out. If you're here in most of North Carolina, zone 7A probably, or warmer, it's probably going to be a reliable perennial for you. This is native to Central and South America. I despise our native ones. They sell so everywhere. These are great. They look nice the entire summer. With that purple foliage, they get the little pink or white or purple flower, depending on the form. But they don't sprawl everywhere and flop over and look ugly after they're done flowering and self-sow everywhere. But anyways, I digress. Try Secretia pallida. Another one I really like, which I grew this as a house plant, and they would say you can grow this as an annual as well. I actually had this survive one winter in Pennsylvania. This is an oxalis. This is oxalis triangularis, and this is probably Mike. I have several, MIJKE, and I don't know how to say that. I asked my student, our students from Croatia who were just here how you might say that, because they give the J sound a Y, and it's like, I don't know if they came up with a pronunciation for
I know
it,
the
but
answer to that. It's Meka.
Meka.
Meka is a feminine Dutch name.
See, I did not know that.
That's what it is. Yeah.
So that's good. I say Mike, but okay, Meka. Meka makes a sense. So it's MIJKE. But anyways, there's other selections. These are considered tender, though. In our climate, zone 7, maybe even 6B south, I think these are going to be reliable perennials for you. And what I like about this, because they can't grow rhubarb here, this is my way of getting a fix. Same chemical that's in this is in rhubarb, and gives it, and if anybody from up north knows what I'm talking about, that's heart flavor. I love that. If you eat excessive amounts of rhubarb or this, you can get stomach upset. But I say throw this in your salad, you'll spice things, or that is, give you a little bit of tang. But anyways, these take full sun, part shade. They're not picky. The only issue I ever come with these is I get some oxalis rust during the summer sometimes. Cut them back, they reflush, no problem.
And I just want to throw out that oxalis rust is a bright, vibrant orange, contrasting with that purple. It is truly beautiful, like truly. It may be a disease, but like it is really spectacular.
Away, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
Anyways, another less common one. This is one I have actually out near our main entrance. I've had them there for 5 years at least. It's a little burnt right now, but this is a Duranta repens, and I don't remember the cultivar of this anymore, but little subshrub. In more warmer climates, their selections probably get 3 to 10 feet tall, depending. And they can get a little lavender flower or white flower or bicolor flower that's lavender or white. But anyways, for us, we just grow it as a foliage plant, but they sell this as an annual. If you put it in a well-drained, reasonably sunny spot, you'll get bright yellow foliage all summer long. And if you don't put it in a wet spot, I think a wet would be our killer in the winter. There's a good chance it'll come back. I don't do anything to it. It's in a very exposed spot. It gets run over occasionally because it's right next to the gate. and it comes back reliably for us. Never been a weed, but Duranta, which is in the Verbenaceae, or what used to be Verbenaceae. So it's probably, I forget where they're putting verbena now. It might be Lamiaceae. Yeah, this has a Lamiaceae-esque stem.
Our records say Verbenaceae.
Verbenaceae. Okay, we're back to Verbenaceae. At times they split verbena or lump it into Lamiaceae, and so I never know anymore. Another one. This is one that it's an exception to the rule for this species, but there's a lot of them. This is a Kufia. This is one Kufia cyanea ashvilla in particular. There's a bunch of other Kufias that you will often find in nurseries at this time of the year, and some of them prove to be hardy for us. A lot of the Kufia igneas, as well as sometimes Hypsopsifolia, if you live out of the coast. They call it Hawaiian heather, which for the Hypsopsifolia, and I think cigar plant for the cyaneas. Those tend to be fairly hardy. David Verity is one that's been really good through many years, as well as a newer selection, which I can't tell the difference, is Vermillionaire, is the trade name. And then there's one that there's another one that has a cigars in Cuba with it. I can't remember. Anyways, a lot of those are hardy for us, but they're sold again as annuals. And you'll get a plant that, I just checked this morning. I have, I think, Vermillionaire coming up out at the street, and I have David Verity coming up in the perennial border. It's already 6 or 8 inches tall. It'll start flowering here in the next probably month, and it'll flower until frost. So Ashvilla is earlier. The species Cyanea typically is not considered hardy here, but this is a selection that was hardy in Asheville, of all places. And for us, it starts flowering the end of April, and it just, again, flowers for a few days, till frost in November. There might, again, be a slight lull once or twice in the summer, but pretty good. And they're great hummingbird plants. This only gets to about 15 inches tall. David Verte about 3 feet tall, and Vermillionaire maybe 24. So, there's a lot of cool things there. So I have a whole group back in here. There's some begonias. This is the traditional wax begonia here. This is Begonia colculata. This is one of the parent species of Begonia simpliflorens cultorums. And this is actually a weed in another pot for us. I didn't have a good plant, and I had to find it. I didn't have any in the trials this year of the wax begonias, but a lot of the wax begonias are proving hardy for us. The angel wing, or that is the dragon wings, have not been hardy. They look very similar to this, but a lot of the Benariensis types and Simpliflorum cultorum types have been hardy for us for multiple years, and I find that really cool. But and those are sold as annuals. Other things, I have a bunch of other begonias, or some other begonias here. Some I don't know how hardy they're going to be. This, I think, is this Eminensis? I have to look. Yeah, Eminensis. That's a species, and that one's been fully hardy for decades here. We have an unknown species here, which I want to test this one out this summer and see what happens to this. I'm hoping that one might be hardy for us. Don't know. Here's another one. This is Plum Paisley. Again, I don't know if this one's hardy. We're finding more and more of them are hardy through our winters, which is really cool as far as I'm concerned. Let's see here. So yeah, try some of those begonias. You might be surprised. The cane ones, like angel wing begonias, I don't think are going to be long-term perennials for us here. But some of the rhizomatous species and the fibrous-rooted ones, like I said, wax begonias, have a really good chance of being good for us. Another plant that's sometimes recognized as being hardy, but often not. This is a Justicia. This is Brandigiana. I have Carnia in the garden. We've had for years. I actually have this one in the garden. I don't have a good spot. It just sulks for me, but it does survive. My friend Bree Arthur, she has one near her old house, I should say, because she has two. And it's been there for decades, and it forms a bush and flowers the entire summer. Mine flowers in September or October, if I'm lucky, most time. But I torture it. A cool one to try. This is a shrimp plant, is a common name for these. These are probably rated zone 9, if not even zone 10. But they often act for us really well as an herbaceous perennial. So, okay, and let's see here. I have just a couple more.
Great.
This is one, I'm surprised that they have the zone rating on this one. This is either a Callilophus if you're a splitter, I'm fine with that, or an Onothera. This is it's a proven winner selection called Superlophus, as in Callilophus, Sunglow. I've had these survive in the garden, no problem. I have other Callilophus type Onotheras that are fine for us. They're shrubby evening primroses, more or less, is the way I look at the Callilophus types of Onothera. But these will flower off and on the entire summer, which is great about them. This is only rated zone 8, I think. Yeah, 8A. So for us, that should be fine. These should be hardy into zone 7, if not zone 6, is my guess. So if you can find these up north, give these a try. Plant them in a full sun, well-drained spot. You probably have a good chance of that being a perennial, is my guess. But anyways, those have been really good for us in the landscape. I have a banana over here, which, if anybody's been to the Arboretum here, we have a bunch of bananas. Not all are considered hardy, but they are herbaceous perennials. I laugh. I see people on Facebook who are on these hardy plant things, and they have banana, and they say, my banana died to the ground, and it's mushy. And then they're all surprised because it throws up from the sides. They think that they're trees, and bananas are not trees. So there's nothing woody in them, so they die to the ground if we get cold. I saw another fellow who's actually with, I think, the University of Maryland, and he plants all kinds of crazy things on their campus. And he was saying he had a fruiting cultivar he had planted, and it was proving to be hardy for him in a sheltered spot. And he realized whenever Facilities was doing some work the other day that there was some hot water lines running underneath it.
Okay.
So he says, "Oh, that means that line runs out here I can plant more out here,
for sure,
away from the building because it's protected."
You laugh, so. And it wouldn't be the most economical to go in and install those lines deliberately to extend the season. But like, if that exists, if that microclimate is there, like, take advantage of it. There's a lot of different ways to stretch zones for plants.
But we have a bunch of bananas that are actually hardy for us, and this is one called Garnet Leaf, I think, or darn, it's something garnet. It's a long leaf garnet or something like that. I think it's long leaf garnet. I've had it survive one winter. It's been borderline for me, but it's one I keep trying. I like it. It's similar to what would be considered a blood leaf banana. I will keep trying. And again, it is technically a perennial, but if we do have a hard winter, it may not make it. The great thing about bananas are, if you really want to, you can dig up a piece fairly easily in the fall. You don't have to, you can either pot it up and put it somewhere where it can actively grow, or you can stash it into a frost-free storage area and let it fairly dry out, and it'll probably be just fine and dandy. But we have other bananas here, Baju, for instance, Balbisiana, Musa volutna, Musa ornata, times Musa volutna. I mean, those are just a couple we have in the garden. Helen's hybrid, Sycamensis, those are all hardy for us here. They can outright be weedy at times, or maybe not weedy. If you plant them, just take into account they can get big if they're happy. Because I have some that are taking over, and I really need to get in with some interns and dig out the rhizomes away from their neighbors. So anyways, I have one down here. This is a tree. Actually, again, we've been growing this species in the garden. This is Erythrina christogalli, which is coral bean. It's the national flower for, I think, Uruguay and Paraguay, and I've actually seen it growing in a park again in Buenos Aires as a small tree, 20, 25 foot tall and full flower. We have it in our garden. We have a form called compacta, which we've had for probably almost a decade in the garden, and it flowers every year. They die to the ground for us. So they're tender for us, but they're root hardy, and then they get 6 to 8 feet tall in a season and throw up beautiful blood red flowers. They're just really cool. And we have a hybrid with this species and our native species, which It flowers even way better than this, but that's Bidwellii.
Yeah.
But those would be considered, based on their parentage, that they should be annuals just in our climate, but are actually hardy for us. And I have one last little plant here, which, again, this is a Nemesia. And what are they saying about this one? They're saying zone 8A. I had mixed results on these. This one should be hardy for us, but it's a matter of surviving our summer. These come from, I think Nemesia is South African. And they don't always appreciate our heat and humidity. So not everything is getting through our winters here, it's getting through our summers. I've had seedlings of these pop up in the fall, and they overwinter and do just fine in flower, and then they succumb to our summer heat. But this is one, if you want to get something out early or late, you at least might be able to get 2 seasons out of it. If you're really lucky and get a part shade spot, you might get Nemesia to survive. This is one, a romance mulberry is the trade name for this one. But anyways, we're going to see if I can kill these in the garden. I know I'll probably kill it in the trials. I'm going to put some in the open garden and see if I can get them to survive. Much like the Calibrachoa, I think it could be something associated with our excess moisture and nutrients that we have in our trial beds at times. Just because we try to make everybody happy by watering them, and not everybody likes so much water. So we'll see what happens.
For sure.
That's there's one more.
Yeah, there is. You were going to skip that one over.
I forgot my favorite here. This is a mangave, which I've had in the garden for it went through 2 winters, but it didn't come back real well the second winter. First winter was great. So there was a baby that survived, and so I brought it in last fall. This is Mangave Mission to Mars. It's a purple leaf. It turns purple under highlight, and it gets about like this. It gets a 2.5-3 foot rosette. So this is a mangave, and mangaves are agaves crossed with manfreda. Some of the parents are tropical, some of them are temperate. So we're finding that some mangaves are hardy for us, top hardy as well as root hardy, and so they're going to say these are tender most of the time, but we're finding more and more of them actually will survive our winters. And if not, they grow very fast, just as fast as an annual. If you want to put them in, you'll get a really cool, nice result the first season. And then if it survives, it survives. There's some that sucker. This is a solitary one for the most part, and others that make really nice colonies. I have snow leopard in the garden. I think I have kaleidoscope.
Okay.
And a couple others that have been pretty good for me. They die back. And then there's whale's tail, I think. Some of the ones that have agave avatifolia in them don't even die back for us. So, but these are touted as annuals, or being grown as annuals for the most part. But there's some that'll surprise you. But then there's other ones which don't surprise me and do die. But anyways, if you can find mangaves to play around with, it may be worth a try.
Yeah.
They're friendlier too if you want to dig them up. These aren't going to cause you to bleed to death like their one parent, the agaves. They do often still do have teeth on the edge or serrated edges, but they tend to be soft enough that they don't impale you. And they break.
Sure.
But they recover very quickly. So that is just a selection of more than you really wanted to know about some things you might try that are, sold as annuals, but they actually be perennial if you try.
Yeah, for sure. We did have one question come in while you were doing all that. Came from Barbara. She says she's in the mountains, zone 7A.
Okay.
She cannot keep Calibrachoa or petunia baskets going for any length of time through the summer. She says the tough love approach sounds intriguing, but how often should the baskets be fertilized? She says she's usually given a half-strength liquid fertilizer about every 10 days. Is that too often?
I mean, it might not flower. In a container is a different story than in the ground.
Yeah, for
sure. My guess is that sounds about right if you're doing half strength.
Yeah.
But read the bottle.
For sure.
Or the bag, depending if it's liquid or granule or one that dissolves. But it could be that excess, stick your finger in the pot to see how moist it is.
Yeah.
Let it dry out a little between waterings is
Yes.
what I think is probably going to be your downfall, especially with petunias and calibrachoa. They don't want to be excessively wet. They'd rather, you can let them get a little bit wilted, and that may be a good indication to water them. Instead of letting them stay constantly wet, they notoriously hate wet feet, especially the calibrachoas. So they will sulk. They'll just sit there and not quite die, but until they won't grow. So that would be my suggestion.
Sure. Yeah,
So,
that sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. Well, that appears to be all of the questions that have come in for today. And that's just about all the time we had. And I've got the hiccups right now anyway, so I think it's time for us to end. So thank you so much, Tim, for pulling all this together and showing us all these wonderful plants and helping us open our eyes to the possibilities that the garden might hold for us. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on the Midweek program today. We will be back next week. We will be doing the premiere of the Plant Lovers Tour about Mexican plants that Dennis just did for us live yesterday. So that will be all kinds of fun. We hope we will see you all next time. Y'all take care.